Hello, everybody. This is Ryan,
This is Avery.
and we are from the Frame by Frame King Crimson podcast, and you are listening to Pods Like Us.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time, as a surprise for people, hopefully, I have a co-host in the shape of Gregg from Bad Counsel. Thanks for being here, Gregg.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be here, and I couldn't be more excited about today's topic.
I think it's great to have you here because of both of us being fans of the subject of the show that we're talking with. And we are talking with today the host of the show Something for Nothing, the Rush Cast, and they are Steve and Gerry. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. So, how were you both introduced to the world of podcasting, Steve?
Well, I come from a radio background, so I deal with podcasting in my line of work, and I also listen to podcasts quite a bit. My favorite podcast is Radio Lab from NPR. It's great, and I also listen to ESPN's Baseball Tonight podcast. Those are two of my favorites, but I listen to lots of podcasts and always wanted to do one. And Gerry, we had talked about that a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, we talked about it on a trip. We were going to see Death Camp for Cutie. We went out to Colorado to see them in Red Rocks.
Nice,
we
beautiful venue.
Yeah, it was great. And we drove to Utah for the day before, and we were just listening. I don't know what we were listening to. We were listening to Rush. Now that I think about it. But we were talking about podcasts for about an hour or more. We just said, we should do a podcast because we both love podcasts. My introduction to podcasts is just as a listener. So I probably started, I think the first podcast I listened to was the Judge John Hodgman podcast. Whenever that started. It's been a long time. So I think it was the first one I listened to. And mostly I do like science stuff and murder podcasts. Science and murder. Two great topics.
Gerry, do you listen to the Unexplained?
No.
That's a good one. It's a British podcast, and it takes some unsolved things. Sometimes they're science, sometimes they're supernatural, and the guy has a very ambient-like voice to me, so it's great to fall asleep to. Sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 days to get through a single episode. It's good.
I'll give it a shot.
So, from going from being listeners to podcast, where did the idea come from of starting your own podcast? And this is probably a stupid question considering, but how did you hit upon the idea of making a podcast about Rush?
Well, as Gerry mentioned, we were driving from Utah to Denver, and we were talking about podcasts, and we thought, well, what podcast can we do? And it just occurred to us that we had spent most of our trip talking about Rush. So this is it. This is the podcast. It was kind of like the Seinfeld moment, right, Gerry?
It was a lot like that. Because I think we were talking about kid gloves. We were listening to Grace Under Pressure, and we're talking about kid gloves. And Steve I don't think you knew what the phrase kid gloves meant.
No, I still really don't.
Okay.
So I was telling him what a kid glove is and what it means, and I swear it was just like, wow, we could talk about that. Like I just turned to him, I'm like, this could be it. This could be the podcast, just talking about Rush, the things that there's so much to talk about in so many Rush songs, just little details about the titles or what one line means. We've talked about one sentence for 5 minutes. And we were talking about Rush the whole time. So there you go. That was the idea. And then, of course, we did it, which was the strange part. It's one thing having an idea. It's another thing just jumping in with 2 feet.
Well, the interesting thing is, I mean, like a lot of really good shows, whether they be podcast or television shows or radio shows, when you've got more than one host, is that you've got different characters. Like with Gregg's show, Bad Counsel, you've got the different characters there. So you two approach the subject slightly from different angles, where yourself, Gerry, you'll look deeply into the lyrics, whereas Steve goes into other areas. I think that's what helps with making the show as good as it is because you've got those different characters and you're looking at it from those different angles. But as fans as well, it's not like a critic or professional looking at things. It's a fan looking at it as any other fan would look at the subject.
Right. And we don't pretend that we're experts about Rush. We're just two regular Rush fans who love the music and want to talk about it. We're not experts, and we know that, right, Jer?
Yeah. I think that's pretty obvious that we're not experts. I think at the beginning I just assumed that people would just agree. I don't know, with my take on things sometimes, and sometimes they don't. I was just shocked, first of all, that anybody listened, but second of all, that people write in, and not that I'm shocked that they disagree. People always disagree with me, but I'm just like, I always just thought that Rush had a certain kind of meaning to people, and especially to me. I had to think about these songs a lot. I think about what the lyrics mean and everything. And when people have different interpretations, it was kind of eye-opening, actually. Even some of like the biggest songs, people have different ideas of what that song might be about.
You guys are being self-deprecating, though, when you don't call yourself experts. You mean, I'm a huge Rush fan, but I've listened to several of your episodes, and I was talking to my wife about this show this morning, and I was like, she was like, "Oh, you're going to do fine, honey." And I was like, "Oh, I hope I don't embarrass myself in front of these Rush fans because they're more knowledgeable than me." And she's like, "Oh, you know so much about Rush." I'm like, "Yeah, but these guys are like the 98th percentile of the curve. There might be some experts out there, but they're few and far between." And I actually use the analogy that you guys are to Rush fandom what I am to Seinfeld fandom. So,
well, I really disagree with that. I don't think we're experts. I mean, Jared, seriously, just talking to our listeners who email us, they know so much more about the band than we do.
Yeah, we're constantly being corrected.
It's crazy.
I know.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, the people from the very first episode, we got emails telling us the stuff we got wrong, the dates we got wrong, the songs we got wrong, the set list we got wrong. This is wrong, this date. So we kind of shy away from specifics. I think over time we were just like, let's not like mention a year. Not even go close to years. This song was recorded in this year or this month. I'm not even going to touch that anymore.
But let's face it, guys, the fans who are going to listen to a Rush Fancast, and I'm one of them, and then write in to correct you guys, they are in that upper 2%.
Oh, yeah.
So, so you're more knowledgeable. You're an expert to the 98% of Rush fans like me who consider themselves diehards. But of course, I'm not fact-checking podcasts and writing in to get letters to the editor. So I was impressed with your knowledge and your guests breaking down your personal top 10 lists. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I'm definitely going to go back and listen to more episodes. And then, with that knowledge, take a second listen or a 2000th listen to some of those songs. And just, it's cool to hear your perspective. People who obviously love Rush the way I do, have thought about Rush and, break it down. It's fun to listen to.
Well, it's great that you say that, because one of the best things that happens is when people write in and say that they hadn't listened to a song in a while, or they didn't like this song, or they didn't really like this album. And then they listened to us talk about it. And then they gained a new appreciation just from the things that Steve and I have said about it. And that's a very high compliment.
Well, the first thing I'm doing after we record today is I'm going to go listen to Xanadu. So,
oh, nice.
There you go. And we're gaining a new appreciation for Rush's music just from talking about it too. I mean, I'm learning things just from researching the songs and the albums before we do the podcast. So I love Rush even more than I did 2 years ago when we started this, which is hard to believe.
Well, recently on one of the episodes, was it Test for Echo or something where Gerry said that he'd not listened to the album other than the one time he heard it when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
He had not listened to it over all those years. And then because he's listened to it for the show, he suddenly realised that he loves the album and there's so much about the album that he likes. And it's just that he's got a new appreciation for that. Is that right, Gerry? Was it that album or was it another one?
It might have been Vapor Trails. It was Test for Echo. I really didn't listen to Test for Echo that much. But it might have been Vapor Trails because, again, I think it was the mix that threw me off when I first heard it. And I didn't really care for it. I saw them on tour, the songs were great, but it was not a go-to album for me at all. But listening to it again and really trying to put myself in the headspace of when the album was written and what it was written about, yeah, it became one of my favorites. It's hard to say it's in the top 10 because the top 10 is crammed full of so many good albums. It's really hard to say, but it definitely jumped up in my estimation.
Steve, was it you who was talking about on a recent episode, The Garden?
Yes.
I love that song.
It's amazing.
And like hearing Gerry talk, I've made some notes, and one of the things I love about Rush is I kind of feel like as I was a child when I started listening to them, but I feel like as my life progressed, as I evolved as a person, in my life changed and I took on different perspectives, that the music meant something different to me. And so with Neil's passing, I haven't listened to The Garden since Neil's passed. It's not a song I listen to often, but I'm looking forward to listening to it because I know that the meaning of things will kind of evolve over time as well. And that's one of the things about great art, right? Is that you hold on to the good meanings, but it also, even though Neil's gone, his art lives and takes on different meanings as we get older.
I would say that the line from The Garden may be my favorite Rush lyric. We haven't talked about this yet, Jared, but the measure of a life is a measure of love and respect. So hard to earn, so easily burned. I mean, there's so much in that line to absorb and for people to live by, really.
You could almost imagine that if Geddy was to ever sing that song again at some point, you could almost think that Geddy would have an added emotion to it now that Neil's gone, and perhaps he might feel Neil within the song, and that add that sort of emotion to him because it's an incredibly emotional song, it was. Oh dear! It actually made me teary the first time I heard the song, to be honest, because it's got that so much in there. But because they are a band who do music that is, should we say, epic in nature, anyway, and straddles different genres and mixes and matches so much. I think that's why their music works so well with Neil's lyrics, is because it can weave its way through all of those different changes and emotions that Neil inherently has in his writing.
Yeah, he definitely has a way of tapping into something. I mean, it's kind of, he says the things that are true to him, but of course they resonate with other people because, they're true. Maybe not true in capital T true, but true in a way, emotionally true. Even on some of the older songs, which aren't necessarily very personal in nature, as he got, into like Power Windows and Beyond, they became a little more personal. But when you start singing about personal things, you realize that other people have the same experiences. Not exactly the same, day-to-day experience, but the same emotional experience over different things. And The Garden is a perfect example because not only does it finish off the album in a perfect way because it's about this character, but the whole album is kind of about the band and their struggle to become whatever they are. And the song also just kind of puts a bow on this character's life, but also on the band and also on the members of the band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've got a lot of love and respect, and that's really all you can kind of hope for in life.
For me as a fan, I think the reason I get emotional about Rush, I mean, I love the music and I'm a word guy like you, Jerry. The lyrics really draw me in, but it really, I have such a close connection and an affinity for like their friendship. Growing up in the suburbs like I did, kind of in an industrial city of the U.S. and being lower middle class at best. I had such friends that grew up with me listening to Rush, and to know that these guys like Geddy and Alex's story, that documentary that came out a few years ago that shows them around the kitchen table with their moms and talking about dropping out of high school. It just was so heartwarming. And I compare it to the lifelong friendships that I've had from growing up. And Rush was a big part of those friendships. And so, that's what makes them so special to me. That's where I get my emotional affinity to their music and to who they are as people.
And it really is amazing that three guys could stay in a band together for 40 years and love each other just as much the last day that they did the first day. And that to me is the most amazing thing about the band. Forget the music, just that they're friends. And they always will
Forget
be.
the music, Steve. What are you talking about? We wouldn't even.
No, you don't.
Forget the music. We can't do that. We'd be out of a job. We don't really
did that.
Yeah, really.
Hey, it's Gil from the Mind Podcast. Today's mind culture and social podcast. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
So controversial question for you guys, and I've fielded it from I consider them lesser Rush fans. They're fans, but they're not as good as me. And you guys talked about it. Marv talked about it. Now that Neil has passed, I remember the documentary that came out after, when Neil wrote Ghostwriter after he lost his wife and his daughter, and how Geddy and Alex were like, well, we thought this is it. This is it. We're done. Because we don't know if Neil will ever come back to us, and he did. But now that he's really gone, I was driving home on the Friday that Neil passed. See, I get emotional talking about Neil, and I remember my friends texting me condolences, but then immediately they were like, "What about Mike Portnoy as a replacement for Neil?" And I couldn't even hear it at that point. The thought of Geddy and Alex with somebody else, and I know they had their original drummer, but it just was. I couldn't comprehend it, but as time passes, I guess I warm to the idea, just because I want Geddy and Alex to be able to express themselves musically and play. So where do you guys stand on the idea that Rush is done, or would you be open to somebody, never filling those shoes, but allowing Eddie or Geddy and Alex to continue?
Well, personally, I'd say no. I'd rather not see them play with somebody else, because that person, would be playing the part of, the understudy. Nobody wants to go see the understudy, first of all. But also, if they were to do something, I would happily go see it. You know what I mean? I trust them as artists,
right,
and as people to only do genuine things. Right, their albums have always been genuine to who they are, or to where they are in their lives, even if people didn't like them at the time, or they haven't stood the test of time. Maybe a couple of them. If they want to do it, I'm all for it. I'd support them 100%.
I would like to see Rush. I would like to see Geddy and Alex play together again, but I don't think they should call it Rush. Call it Lee Lifeson. Call it something else. The only way I think they should perform as Rush is, Gerry and I have talked about this, if they did an acoustic show, just Geddy and Alex, no drums. I mean, I know that's not really Rush without the drums, but when they did Resist without Neil would take a break and Alex and Geddy would do Resist, and it was fantastic. I think they could do smaller venues, a set of certain Rush songs, kind of as a tribute to Neil, maybe for charity, cancer research, something like that. I think Rush fans would love it.
Yeah, I definitely would love to see that, and probably would get a lot of older gems. You know,
Sure.
You couldn't obviously do Xanadu or Tom Sawyer that way, but you could probably do a whole bunch of different songs acoustic.
Lakeside Park.
Yeah. Just play that for 2 hours.
But you could do The Garden, you could do Resist, you could do Lakeside Park, you could do Losing It, maybe Closer to the Heart. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rivendell.
Tai Shan.
Tai Shan.
Yeah, that'll make Gerry happy.
Yeah, really.
One of my top 10, as I was creating my mental top 10 list listening to you guys today, that they could do in that acoustic sense, I think, is I love Nobody's Hero, from Counterparts.
Yeah. There's lots of songs.
That'd be another one.
Yeah.
Beautiful score to that as well that they did. Orchestral. Really nice on that, Nobody's Hero.
Yeah.
You reminded me that recently when I was listening to one of your episodes, you mentioned about Resist. And I actually thought, and I probably put it in my blog as well, actually, that you made me think, what if on the original album, Resist had have just been an acoustic number as opposed to the big production? Because you're right, it's almost as though, to me personally, that acoustic treatment lends it a bit more almost gravitas or more feeling, in a sense, because it's just giving it that laid back approach which suits the lyrics perfectly. And it will almost be a nod back to the days when they did used to just do, like on Fly By Night, where you'd have all these big grandiose numbers like Bite, and then suddenly you'd have a laid back, as I've mentioned, Rivendell. So it would harken back to that sort of thing if they'd have done Resist as just an acoustic number on the album.
I agree, because I was never a big fan of the instrumentation of that song. I would listen to it because the lyrics were perfect, but the keyboards, the piano part didn't really do it for me. But then when they did it live, and it's funny because it's one of the only Rush songs I can actually play on guitar. It's very easy to play.
I think what we're discovering, guys, is listening to the live albums that Rush really took a lot of the songs from their studio albums and perfected them on the live albums and in their live shows. And Resist is just another example of that. And there's so many we talked about on different stages, Jared. Bravado, right?
Yeah.
Was so much better on different stages than it was in the studio version. Not that the studio version was bad. It's just they added something to it live.
Yeah, it's like which concert film is it from? The version of After Image that I love the live version of that has got so much more to it. I mean, I love the original version from the album. Don't get me wrong, but there's something about the live version of that that's just incredible. But it's like a lot. Like there's a few bands that are like that though, where they will perform songs live and give them, and the live treatments make those songs resonate more. A bit like Queen, for instance. If Queen do songs live, I think their live performances are just up there in comparison. Like you said, it's almost like the songs grow the more that they play it. So you've done the recording, but that's just basically almost like the demo of what you're going to see them play live. So the same goes for Rush. When they play things live, it's got a completely different feel to it altogether.
And that's why we go see live music, right? It's just, sometimes it's terrible. I mean, that's just, what are you going to do? Sometimes it's transcendent, though. I mean, who knows? These bands, when they get up on stage, it's the alchemy of the band themselves and the day and the atmosphere and the people. I've seen bands on one night where it was the most amazing thing because the crowd was respectful and great. And I saw them the following night, and the crowd stunk, and so they weren't as good. You know what I mean? It's part of the give and take when they can feed off the audience. At least that's why I go see things live.
It's kind of like the Mendoza line to me for musicianship. Is there are bands who are talented and compelling, but in a live situation, they're trying to replicate what they did in the studio.
Yeah,
Where other bands transcend, and it's like, yeah, that's our departure point. What we did in the studio, and we loved it, but that was a moment in time, and we are living, breathing, evolving musicians, and so we're going to take something, and without fear, I don't know, improve upon it is the right word, but continue to let it evolve, and we trust that our fans will appreciate it.
Yeah, it's one of the critiques that Rush has, it's been levied against Rush for a while, is that they would just replicate the studio parts. But I don't really think that's true. I think that comes probably more from the 80s stuff, where they had a lot of triggers and things like that, and the synth stuff that they weren't actually necessarily playing, that they would trigger the sounds. So they had to be a little more in lockstep, I guess, with the song as it was written. But, if you listen to, like we just talked about different stages on the podcast, if you listen to that, there's some solos are different and incredible, and there's lots of extra little tidbits here and there. It's fantastic.
Well, you've got things there with the different stages where, because they're not using the triggers so much, you've got Alex, for instance, will almost come up with a new guitar part in a way, because he's trying to get the best, or the bits that stand out from the album version, and from that he'll pick out the bits from all these different guitars that he's put down. He might have put 3 different parts down rhythm wise, and then he's got the lead, so he takes of that what he can to make what he thinks is best for playing it live, but then at the same time he's improvising around that at the same at the same time on stage. He's got that basis, and then he'll take that and then add another layer to it. So that's adding something there that wasn't there in the first place with the original recording.
Yeah, that's the most amazing thing we found listening to different stages, is when you listen to the Power Windows songs and when you listen to the Hold Your Fire songs, where a lot of times Alex was a little bit lost in the studio version. He just brings himself to the forefront live, and it's just amazing, especially the Hold Your Fire stuff. I mean, it's a different Alex live than it was in the studio. Don't you think, Jer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Alex was always, I guess he's the guy who can play around more than the other two. You know what I mean? He's always the little experimenter up on stage. He's doing weird things. Like he used to do that thing in YYZ. You know what I mean? That in between the drum and the bass solo, he would do this thing. He would be like, like there's the weirdest noises coming out of him, and he'd just make these weird faces and stuff like that, because he could just do whatever he wants. Those guys, Geddy and Alex, Geddy and Neil had to be a little more, holding down the song, and he could just go and do whatever he wanted.
They had their musical hands full, right?
Think
about Neil with that kid, and Geddy with playing the pedal bass and the keyboard, and Alex was just kind of free ranging out there.
Yeah, he was always great.
But you could see that Alex was having so much fun while he was doing it, because he would be there doing these things and he'd be laughing out loud, and you can see him just laughing at the same time as doing it, because he's having so much fun. Just freewheeling, just going, right, I'm going for it no matter what. Right. And like you said, Geddy's there and Neil are there, just laying down that rhythm, the backing for Alex to basically go crazy and do whatever he wants.
Right.
Yeah, Neil was the one who would stay true to the studio version for the most part, and Alex would just go off.
Yeah. Well, that's a great thing of having 3 people. You can negotiate those kinds of things, I suppose. If they had 4 or 5, who knows what would have happened. But, having only one guitarist, he just, tap dance his way through a song however he wanted to.
And those guys just played off each other so naturally. Marv, you just said, you talked about Alex and how much fun he's having on stage. And again, for like that emotional connection to the music for me, that's like a adolescent's dream for me. Is like I'm going to have my two best friends, or Alex is my best friend, Getty and Alex, and we're just going to make music together for the rest of our lives and have fun and be best friends, and what's and there didn't seem to be those rivalries or those down moments, and just to see three friends who could do that together, that's like, man, that's what we all aspire to when we're adolescents, to be hanging out with our mates 40 years later doing what we love.
Yeah.
I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And we're from the Spy Hards Movie Podcast.
That's right. And you are listening to Pods Like Us, the podcast that has a license to thrill.
But like I was saying earlier on about, your podcast and other shows, it's the same with bands where with Rush, you've got three distinct, different personalities in that band. And that's what works. And I think that's what kept their friendship close, is because there were differences between them, but there were also similarities between each other as well. And I think that's what makes for a good friendship. And I think that's also what makes for a good band.
Yeah, Steve and I think you said this before, we do have different approaches to the podcast in general. We have different approaches to a lot of things. Steve is a little more put together than I am. He's a little more, you know what I mean? Like I'm kind of scatterbrained. I'm all over the place sometimes. But Steve's got an actual head on his shoulders that he can, do things and do them right. And I don't. Like, we prepare differently for the shows. We definitely prepare. I definitely prepare for the shows. Steve takes more notes, I think. Just tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Writes down actual questions that he wants to get to, these touchstones throughout the episode. And I write down ideas. We should talk, if I'll be like, we should talk about, this song, and I'll just put the name of the song. That's it. You know what I mean? I don't have any questions to ask. But Steve is able to be more like the ringmaster of the episodes, whereas I'll ask follow-up questions that maybe I didn't even have written down or hadn't thought of before. But Steve's always able to kind of grab something from the answer and turn it back into the actual point of the episode and push the episode forward that way.
Well, I think that's a good combination for a lot of things, and in podcasting too. We have it on our show as well. One person kind of driving the show, and allows the others of us to kind of fill those gaps. And I have notions of what I might say or talk about, but it's for me, it's choosing when to speak up and when to remain silent to let somebody else fill that air. But we have our Tim, who kind of just leads us on a path, through those things.
And I think another advantage that Gerry and I have, which I would say 99.9% of podcasts don't, is that we've known each other for 40 years. So I would think there are very few podcast hosts who have known each other for as long as Gerry and I have. And I think in a lot of cases, we know what the other guy's thinking, and we just get along great, kind of like the guys in Rush. So I think that's an advantage for us as well.
Sure.
So what is your history then with Rush? Go on. I know you mentioned it in your show, but mention it for the people who are listening to this show, how you discovered Rush, Steve.
Well, I'll start first, since I discovered Rush before Gerry did. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Columbia House Record Club.
Oh, yeah.
Sure you are, Gregg. I don't know if they had that in the UK.
I defrauded them quite a few times.
That's what everybody says.
Yeah.
How did that company stay in business for so long?
My alias was Kevin Snack. That's the name I came up with. I was in college, and I thought, what should I call this name? Kevin Snack. That was my guy.
We have something very similar in the UK.
Okay, well, I joined Columbia House, and two of the albums I chose were Moving Pictures and Signals. This was probably around 1982, and the first time I heard Moving Pictures, I was blown away. And I was a bassist in a band in high school, and me and the drummer in my band just absorbed Rush like crazy after that. And we would play in between band practices. We'd we'd be playing Rush songs. His name is Ron Lipnicki. We actually had him as a guest on our podcast a few months ago. So we became pretty big Rush fans. We weren't huge Rush fans, but in 1986, we were finally old enough. I was 17, I guess, to go to concerts on our own. So we got tickets to see Rush, and we got 4 tickets, and we didn't have anybody to drive us. So we asked Gerry, and that's where he jumps into the story. So Gerry came with us to the show, and Gerry, you can pick it up from here.
Yeah, and I had never listened to Rush. I probably had heard Tom Sawyer on the radio, maybe. I certainly wouldn't have picked them out of a lineup or anything. So I went to the show just because why not, right? And I don't know what day of the week it was, but I was up for
live
anything.
music out of the house, right?
Right, get them get out of the house. So we just went, and it was the most fantastic thing I'd ever seen. I've never had a concert experience like that where I went in not knowing anything about the band. Literally like, okay, I'm just here. I'm the ride. You know what I mean? And walking out a lunatic. I walked out of that place a lunatic. It was the strangest experience of my life to see what I had seen. I couldn't. And from that second on, that was it. I was in love with Rush.
So was that
And my
the first-
appreciation.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so would that be both of yours first experience of seeing a band that are seen as a progressive style band that have progressive tendencies to their music and whose music straddles all these different things and goes from one scene to another to another to another? Is this your first experience of that?
For me,
was.
definitely. For me, definitely. Who had we seen before that, Jer?
I think I had seen U2 and maybe Ozzy. Did we see Ozzy before that, or was that after? Metallica, Ozzy.
Yes, that was before. That was 1985. I had seen Judas Priest, Dio, and Ozzy. So yeah, the first progressive experience for sure for me.
And I have to say, I'm not a huge progressive rock fan.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I liked old Genesis and Yes.
Yeah.
But as a diehard prog fan, I'm not really a diehard prog fan, but that's where Rush comes in, right? They had their prog years, but they certainly aren't. I don't consider them to be, like a prog band. Mm-hmm. Certainly not now from, 80, 84 on. I don't think they were anywhere near prog. Then again, I don't have the prog history to really make that statement as declarative as I would like to be.
Gerry, is that a disclaimer so you don't get any letters?
Yes.
From the prog experts?
Yep. That is actually.
What do you mean that they weren't prog after 84? Let me point to these facts.
Yeah, let me say this song was 6 minutes long. But that's the great thing about Rush is that they straddled that line between rock and prog. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like they aren't like we've talked to some people, some drummers, other musicians about Rush's odd time signatures, which seems to be the hallmark of prog. If anyone's going to point to anything about what prog is like, they play in, 7/8 time or whatever. But with Rush, you don't really catch it. I've said this before. You don't notice them that much as with other prog bands. Other prog bands, you're like, oh yeah, this is in a funky time. If you listen to some Yes songs, it's like, you're like, what is going on in this song? There's definitely something going on in this song that's, throwing off my rhythm, and that's the point of it. But Rush will do the same thing, but they don't throw off the rhythm. They still have like a rock thread running through these proggy songs, and maybe that's why someone like me who isn't a big prog fan can still enjoy the super proggy stuff.
Before we
I think
lose
what elevated
this thread,
them for me is that the lyrics, for me, I did I wasn't a prog guy, but I liked Rush and Yes, and I liked Emerson, Lake and Palmer, among a bunch of bands. But for me, they were so literate. That's what really drew me into Rush. Was I was a book nerd. I liked to read. Yeah. And the idea that somebody was a rock star and he was basing songs on Ayn Rand books, I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Right.
This is tailor made for me.
Right. And just the subject matter songs.
For sure.
Just it's the craziest subject matter ever for songs.
But like natural science, right? Yeah.
Natural science. Even stuff like Manhattan Project. What kind of song is that to write? Who writes a song like about the Manhattan Project?
Well, when I saw like Bytor and the Snow Dog on a cassette label, I was like, wow, I want to hear what that is. I can't imagine.
What could that possibly be?
That's one of my top 10 songs actually by Rush.
Really?
Bytor, yeah. I just love the music to that and how it changes, and then you have the breakdown where it'll stop and you'll get so many beats, and then the next bit it's a beat less, and then it's a beat less, and it's a beat less, and then you get that long distorted. Is that a bass or something? That or whatever it is there.
Yeah,
I have no idea what that is. I just thought when I first heard that, I thought, what the hell is that? I don't know what it is, but I love it. There's something about that I love. And it brings me to my something interesting when Gregg was talking about reading. My first experience with Rush would be when I was a kid. And a friend of mine, I was actually staying over at his, and he had all sorts. I mean, he introduced me to metal, so I'd go there, and before I'd been there, I'd never known any Black Sabbath, no Deep Purple. He introduced me to Rainbow, and then when that came on, and suddenly Rivendell came on from the Fly By Night, and this song's going on, and I'm thinking, this sounds like that book I'm reading at the moment, The Hobbit. Okay. And the more I listened to it, I thought, he set The Hobbit, or one little bit of The Hobbit, to music. That's incredible. And that was my first experience, really. I think that I have, or first memory I have of listening to Rush. And then from then I had to just, as soon as I left school and got started to get money, I bought every Rush album up to that moment that had come out. And I did the same with Genesis as well when I left school. I bought all theirs as well. And God, I had so many tapes when I left school. Crazy.
I had a similar epiphany, it was with Anthem, and I was like, wow, I'm cool. I'm a person who knows the novel that this song is referencing. And so, of course, in middle school, it's like, hey, yeah, I know you like Anthem, but do you know the inspiration for that song? Let me tell you. And now listen to it again, because you'll hear the parallels with the novel. It made me feel like cool to know something so niche like that.
Right. Until somebody was just
Fountainhead, though.
Until somebody was just like, I'm not reading that book.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait a minute, you're making a kid read a book?
Yeah.
That's the thing about Rush, right? They can make grade schoolers read books.
Mm-hmm. On the podcast, we ask all of our guests their Rush origin story, and it's so great to hear everybody's story because every single story is different. Martin, that's the first time I've heard anyone mention Rivendell as their entry point to Rush, and I just think that's incredible.
I mean, it's probably, it's not even one of my favourite songs on that album, but it's just my entry point to Rush.
Mm-hmm.
This is Dave of Live Life Loud, the Decibelic podcast, and you're listening to Pods Like Us with Marv.
I had a Sony Walkman that I'd gotten for Christmas. I was a newspaper delivery boy in Pittsburgh. So 365 days a year, I was up at like 5:30 in the morning before school delivering newspapers in the darkness of Pittsburgh in the cold. It was cold all the time. And I remember like listening to Moving Pictures and like Red Barchetta. And it was like, it was like an otherworldly feeling to have that soundtrack in my neighborhood that was devoid of any life or motion at that hour of the day. That was kind of my science fiction soundtrack to being out there in the world in kind of a strange time of day.
That's one of my top 10 of their songs as well, by the way. Red Barchetta.
Yeah, I love that song.
I love the breakdown when it just stops and it goes into that. They've got an incredible groove that just goes there when it's the moment. Is it supposed to be where they're just driving? Is that what that's supposed to signify? Is that them just driving at speed? That bit there, but I just love that bit. It's one of the greatest grooves I've ever heard in music. That is.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that they can catch on to a groove, a nice rock groove. They could do a crazy song like Red Barchetta, but you could dance. I mean, if I were a dancer, I could dance to it, right? I mean, these things are they lock onto a groove. It's incredible, and that's why I think, again, not trying to cover my ass on this, but not having the prog background, but you're not really dancing to a lot of old Genesis. Do you know what I mean? Like they definitely are great songs, but they don't catch a groove for me anyway. The same way that Rush does.
Except maybe for Roundabout, which that was amazing when Geddy did Roundabout with Yes.
Yeah, that was.
I love that.
Yeah, but see, if I'm going to dance, no offense, guys, but I want there to be girls to dance with, and those are few and far between at every Rush concert. Yeah.
I dance like no one's watching because no one ever is.
So my favourite Rush album would be, if I had to pick one, would be Moving Pictures. How about all of your three's favourites? We'll start with Gregg, actually, the co-host. Favourite Rush album?
Hold Your Fire, and I know that's maybe a surprise choice, but again, for me, I couldn't separate the experience of my life from Rush at that point. And I remember the night I purchased, it was a cassette. I remember the night I purchased that cassette. I was with friends. We were in the city. We were suburban kids, but we had a night out in the city, and our mom had literally dropped us off in a city neighborhood in Pittsburgh. We went to a downtown record shop, which was cool. And Hold Your Fire had just come out. And I was like, man, so to me, it was like my emerging independence. I was navigating around in a city and I was choosing music, and boy, wasn't I a sophisticate. And so, that really was cool. And I liked having Amy Mann on that track. And I thought it was unique and cool that, this is the first person they've invited to participate in that way. And I thought, man, this is cool.
And until that episode that you guys did about that album, I didn't know that she was on two of the songs.
Did I?
No.
Steve,
I don't either. What other song is she on? Steve?
What other song was she on? I forget now. What did I say?
Let me pull up the track list.
I don't remember what you said, Steve. She's buried in the
I don't remember now. I don't remember now. See, I should listen to my own work.
Yeah. I'm going to go back and listen to that episode for sure.
Has Gerry just told us which one it was?
No, did I? No. I don't think so. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jerry. I was gonna say I think it's just buried in one of the songs. Like you can't even hear it, but she's on it.
Yeah, so. It was background vocals, whatever it was. We'll have to go back and check it. I'm going to tell you what my
Prime Mover, is it?
Prime Mover. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
She could be that ethereal voice at the beginning.
That's possible. Yeah.
Or not.
So my favorite Rush album. My favorite Rush album is Moving Pictures, Martin.
Yeah.
Because it was my entry point for Rush. I mean, I know a lot of people's favorite is Moving Pictures, but you're just not going to get a better album in general. Forget Rush album.
Yeah.
But top to bottom, those 7 songs are amazing and will always be my favorite Rush album. Jer?
Same with me. It's Moving Pictures. It's just it's just like Steve said, side 1 is one of the greatest album sides in rock history. It's so hard to find 4 songs that are as good as those 4 songs in a row in that sequence. It's just untouchable.
It's almost like a transitional album as well, because it's almost like the transitioning from the band that were, I'm going to use that word again, prog, previous to that. It's almost like it's, like I said, from there, and then after that, they become something else. They've always got these steps in their career where after so long, they'll have a transitional album, like 2112 is the transition from the old Rush to what came next. And then I suppose after that, the next transition would be Moving Pictures, and then maybe Hold Your Fire, I guess, would be the next transition.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the other great things, that they never rested on their laurels. I mean, they could have made Moving Pictures for the rest of their careers. And But why would they?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they had so many different ideas, and they were restless creativity. What am I looking for? Creatively.
Yeah.
And so why would you want them to stop? You may not appreciate everything, but at least they were, moving about. They weren't stagnant. Don't want my artists to be stagnant. You know what I mean? I don't want to read the same book over and over again or hear the same song over and over again.
I do wish they'd stayed committed to their kimonos, though.
Yeah, well, fashion never changes. You should
I asked
always
my
that
mom,
off.
"Can I get a kimono, Mom?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" Well, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, really.
Well, let me show you this picture.
Yeah.
She was like, "No,
Can I have these tight
definitely not."
pants, please?
I think she thought it was like a movie cover for like a pornography or something, like those three kimonos standing there. She was very shaken when I showed her that picture.
Like a
And I was
romance
like, no,
novel?
Mom, it's music. It's music.
Yeah. It's a rock and roll romance novel.
Yeah. You're looking at men in silk robes, Gregg. Okay.
And you're like, yeah.
Yes, and I'd like one. I'd like a kimono of my own.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I've never seen Rush live, and it's the biggest, one of the biggest regrets I've got in life. That is not seeing them live. I had the chance of seeing them at Sheffield Arena when a friend of mine asked me, and I couldn't get the time off to go and watch. And I really wish I'd have just rung in sick and pretended that I was sick and gone to watch them. To be honest, what about your own experiences with Rush? Steve, is there any standout moment you've seen Rush live? Because I know you and Gerry have seen Rush tons of times live.
Yeah, I saw them, I believe, 28 times, and I think there were two shows that I went to that Gerry didn't. So that would put Gerry at 26. My standout show would have to be the two Jones Beach shows we saw. Jones Beach is a venue on Long Island, just outside of New York City, and it's on the water. And the sound there is just incredible, and the setting is incredible. And to me, those were the two Rush shows that Gerry and I saw that just blew me out of the water. And of course, we were close to the water, so that just made it more fantastic. Do you agree, Gerry?
Yeah, because the first time what was the tour where they first played the Analog Kid, Steve? Was that? Oh, see, these are the specifics that
you're putting me on the spot.
I know.
This is why we're not real Rush fans.
Well, no, but the fact that you guys could even attempt to make that reference again puts you at the 98th percentile, in my opinion.
And then the second time I think it was the Counterparts tour, maybe, let's say. But then the second time was the Time Machine tour, where they played Moving Pictures in its entirety.
Yeah,
which was
that's cool.
Amazing. Wow. Just because, the solo on Limelight is my favorite Alex solo. But that night, again, something with I don't know if it was the water, the people, I don't know what was in the air. He played this solo like his heart, like he was just bleeding all over his strings. It was the most amazing. So maybe it had more to do with me hearing the album, but then for him. But it was definitely one of the best solos I've ever heard anybody play. But then again, the R40 tour was simply one of the most amazing stage presentations I've ever seen at a rock show. It was incredible. The first time we saw it, I was so enamored of the set list that I didn't even notice things were changing behind them. I was just so into the songs and the choices and just everything about it. And then we saw them again like a couple of nights later. And then I paid attention to what was going on behind them. And it was just the most fantastic thing I'd ever seen. It was such I guess at the time, nobody knew it was going to be their last tour. But if you could definitely tell, I think, from what was happening behind them, that it was going to be their last tour.
That reminds me of the interview that you both did with the violinist who was on that tour and on was he on the previous tour as well? And that was a great interview then.
Thanks. I thought it came out pretty good too. Jonathan Dinklage.
And that was another of those Rush concert experiences that I will never forget is seeing Jonathan Dinklage play Losing It on that final tour.
Mm-hmm.
So emotional and just so great to see Rush do that song for the 5 times they did it in their career. And Gerry and I were there for 2 of those, which is amazing to me.
And then to hear him tell the story about playing it that first night we saw him, where he was so nervous, because he told the story about how he got into Rush. He was a young violinist and he loved Rush, but then he heard, Losing It, electric violin. And he had just gotten into the electric violin. So he had learned the song when he was like 14 years old. He played it. The first day he got the album, he learned how to play that whole solo, and he would play it and play it and play it and play it and play it. And then he got to play it with them. And he said he stepped up on stage and he doesn't even remember playing the song because he went into a different kind of headspace where he didn't even play. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't consciously, he wasn't consciously playing. And with that in mind, you could definitely tell when we saw, because it was incredible watching him play this solo. He was so into it, and to know that he was basically not even in the room when he was playing it just really made the memory even that much more better.
Hey, this is Brian with Concerts That Made Us podcast, and you're listening to Pods Like Us, a great show about other great shows.
What about yourself, Gregg? You've seen Rush live. Anything?
Like in the teens, I will confess to not have kept an exact count, but there was a flurry in the 80s and early 90s, when I was in junior high school, and college, where I went to Penn State, and we would drive to Philly, or we would drive to Cleveland, or we would drive to Pittsburgh on the same tour. So in the teens. But, for me, it was that first concert, seeing them. As Steve and Gerry described, I was 15. My 2 closest friends were 15 as well. Our mom dropped us off in downtown Pittsburgh. We were like, no, Mom, drop us like several blocks. This is close enough. We'll walk the rest of the way. We don't want to see, we don't want anyone seeing our mom dropping us off in her Buick Regal.
Right.
And so it was amazing. I felt like an adult who was exploring my artistic interests and felt empowered. It was cool, And then the other, I don't know if you guys have any memorable opening acts for Rush, but I discovered Eric Johnson going to a Rush show. Mm-hmm. The opening chords of Cliffs of Dover, where we were still kind of finding our seats when Eric Johnson was playing, and then Cliffs of Dover came on. I was like, wow, what is this? And I was like, man, this Rush attracts cool friends, It was cool.
Yeah, I think that the best opening band for me was Primus.
Oh my God, Les Claypool. God, I mean, those 2 bassists in the same building. My God,
Yeah, and there's stories of them on that tour and the first tour they were on with them in the second tour, where they would have a daily jam session, the 2 bands. They'd meet in the parking lot, 4:00 in the afternoon, and people would bring acoustic guitars and stuff like that. But Les Claypool he'd bring a natural gas tank and bang it. You know what I mean? They had the craziest jam sessions where with no holds barred, anything goes. And the 6 of them would just sit around and play for an hour and then go have dinner. That would have been, if I was on that road crew, that's when I would take my cigarette break. I'd sit on top of a bus and watch that for an hour.
You'd wish they'd recorded that, wouldn't you? And then have it as a bonus disc on one of these live things where they just jam. That'd be
amazing.
Awesome.
Incredible.
Because unfortunately, Rush is the sort of band where you don't actually get any outtakes or any songs that didn't make it or anything like that. They're one of those bands where they go in and they go in with what they end up coming out with. There's nothing there for us to, grab onto that's not come out already.
Yeah. Like Geddy said, every song took maximum effort. So can't put effort into something that's not going to see the light of day.
Yeah, and if a song wasn't working, they just wouldn't complete it. They just scrap it, and that'd be the end of it.
Yeah, and it's commendable in a way where, even those scraps, some bands, should we say, like the Beatles, for instance, or whatever, might milk that for all they can get for people who'll just buy any old tat, should we say. Whereas Rush stand by their guns and just say the idea didn't work. We thought it was rubbish. Why should we give it to people when we thought it was rubbish?
Right. Yeah. Why give the baby steps?
Yeah.
Getting there, because they did rework songs, and obviously they must have recorded them. But who wants to hear that, right? Who wants to hear them? Who wants to hear the song as it wasn't working? That doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
So going back to the show, is there a structure to the show? Do you structure each episode according to what it's going to be about? Because you do episodes about the albums, and then you'll do interview episodes, and then you'll do episodes where you're talking about your favourite songs. And I think you've done favourite album covers as well. Yeah, I think.
Not yet. No, we haven't done that one yet. That's a good
That'd be
idea,
a
though.
fun show. Yeah.
It's a good idea. Hold on. Let me write that down.
You could get you on as a guest to actually discuss the album covers and then find out what his favourites are as well.
There you go. There you
From
go.
your mouth to God's ears.
I've got yes.
For a long time, I wanted to get a "Hold Your Fire" tattoo. The guy juggling the flaming balls.
Yeah.
But I could never find it. I did settle on a "Fly By Night" tattoo, though. Eventually.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the structure, we pretty much try and just do a short intro for each episode. Gerry and I talk for 30 seconds. And then if I have a Twitter poll to talk about, we talk about that. If Gerry gets an email, well, we do an email every week now. We get so many emails. So we choose an email to read and discuss that. And then we get right into either our topic or our guest. Just from listening to podcasts myself, I appreciate it when the podcast gets into the meat of the topic right away. So we try and do that within 5 minutes and try and not steer it in a different direction and go off on a tangent for 20 minutes, because for me personally, I don't want to hear that. So I think that our listeners also don't want to hear that. So we get right to the guest or the topic at hand right away. And that's pretty much it. And then after the interview or after the topic, we do kind of a 5-10 minute postscript, and that's that.
Yeah.
So is there a lot of editing involved then in the show to edit out any tangents that you might go off on that you feel doesn't serve the episode?
Absolutely. Yeah. We edit it afterwards. If we go off on a tangent, like you said, that we didn't feel added anything to the conversation, we cut that out. Again, I'm just thinking about the listener, and I like to think of it, someone commuting to work. It's a 45-minute commute. Try to keep the episode as close to 45 minutes as possible. Sometimes we veer closer to an hour. Sometimes it's a little shorter than that, but we want our listener to get a nice experience in 45 minutes to an hour, and join us again next week.
Smart.
Yeah, I have to say, Steve is the actual professional, as I said before, in the duo here. So he edits he says we. He's using the royal we, but it's not the royal we. It's him. He edits the whole thing, and he's always made the best choices. I don't think I've ever disagreed with anything he's ever done. So it's all, if it sounds good, it's all him. If it sounds bad, it's all me.
Go on then, Steve. So how do you actually record and then edit the show together?
Well, when we started out, Gerry would come here to my house and we would record together. But when COVID started, in the before times, so now what we do, when COVID started, Gerry got his own equipment and I've got my own equipment. So we record via Zoom, but we don't use the Zoom audio. We record our own audio on our own equipment in our separate homes. Yep. And then we use the Zoom audio for the most part for the guest. And what I'll do is I'll take each of those tracks. I take Gerry's track, I take my track, I take the guest track, and then I mix those together. And I cut out the room noise, cut out all the extraneous stuff. And if we talk over each other, I clean that up. So I make it sound as perfect as I can, and probably do more editing than I should. to clean it up, but I think it makes the podcast sound better. And just being a radio geek and an audio geek, I want to make it sound as good as possible. So that's what I try to do.
You guys sound great. Great voices, both of you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's something I have never heard. Thank you very much.
No, seriously. I mean, I was listening to this morning. I was like, wow, this is really, I love the subject matter, but it is really listenable. And I love the pace of the show. And you guys, you go into depth, but I didn't detect any like rabbit holes you were going down. It sounded really good.
Yeah, Steve has a tendency to take out my rabbit holes, which is great because he'll take. It's so funny. At least once every third episode, I'll listen to it and I'll say, "Man, it sounds great as usual," and then he'll be like, "Yeah, sorry, I had to cut out that thing you started talking about, whatever," and I'm like, "I don't even remember saying that, so it's fine with me that you cut it out because it sounds so good." You know what I mean? It's all the. He's just very good at what he does. So if I complained about it, I'd be a total jerk.
Our host and producer Tim is the same way. There are things that my wife is on the show as well, and she's much more observant than me. And she'll say like, "Oh yeah, Tim removed that where we were talking over each other." I'm like, I don't even remember what I say on the show, honestly. So I listen to it the next day. And I think psychologically that's my protection for myself because I say such crazy shit. But Tim just makes it sound seamless. He's perfect. And that's an unabashed plug for my host and producer, Tim.
I think what else helps with your show, the Rush podcast, is the music. That bass is fantastic. Mm-hmm. So what's his name again? Is his name Lex?
His name is Lex. He's a childhood friend of ours. We went to high school with him, and we've known Lex for almost 40 years as well. And he's an amazing bassist. And when we started the podcast, we didn't want to use Rush's music for our intro and outro for legal reasons. So we thought, what can we do? And I asked Lex to record the bass line for Something for Nothing. And he did that, and it sounded great. And then as we progressed, I kept tapping Lex and saying, "Hey, maybe you could do the bass line for this song. How about do the bass line for that song?" And now I pretty much bug him every week to do the bass line for us. And he loves doing it because he loves learning a new Rush song. And I think it really adds to the show, and he's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and he tries to get the right effect as well. That he makes it almost sound like it was the original bass from then as well by having the right distortion on some of the songs or not on some other songs. Do you actually pick the song that he's going to do the bass for yourself, or does he just throw you occasionally bass lines that he'll think, "Oh, you might like this one"? And so, how does that work?
Well, sometimes I give him a specific song I want. For instance, we had Jared Schofer on a few weeks ago who was walking across the United States to raise money for cancer, and I wanted Marathon. I thought that would be great for the show, so I asked for that specific song. But when we were talking about a specific album, I would give him, "Here are the 4 songs we're going to talk about. You pick one." And then I'd let him pick the one he was most comfortable playing or wanted to give a shot. So it depends.
And you've had some really good guests on, like, you've already mentioned Jonathan. How do you go about setting those up?
It really depends. It depends on who's listening. We've had a couple of people on who actually actively listen to the show, and I think they were following us on Twitter. So we're just like, well, this guy's listening to the show. Let's just get him on the show. Why not, right? But there's writers. Writers are always looking to talk about their books. They want to sell books, so we have writers on. We talked to Steve. How did we get Dale Heslip?
Well,
Dale directed Time Stand Still, the documentary Time Stand Still, their final concert tour.
I found Dale's website, and his email address was on his website. So I just
there
shot
you
him
go.
an email, and there you go. but what we found is a guest like Dale Heslip led us to one of our other guests, which was Miller, who was the field director for Time Stand Still. And I asked Dale after we had him on, he was so thrilled with the interview that we did. I said, who else could we talk to that you think would be good? And he said, Miller. And boy, was he right. Miller was fantastic.
He was a great guest.
So it seems like a lot of our guests are either helping us get other guests, or just the fact that they've been on the show adds some clout for us. And when they see, wow, they talked to Dale Heslip, well, maybe they should talk to me too. So they say yes.
And you'd be surprised at what people will say if you ask them. Sometimes they say yes.
Yeah, right on.
I don't think I've ever gotten an email back from someone saying no. I haven't gotten emails back, that's for sure. But nobody's just like, no, I'm not doing your stupid show. If people are like, oh, that sounds very interesting. And then with Rush, the guest pool is endless.
Mm-hmm.
It's really endless. There's so many things out there that are Rush related. So many books, so many celebrities who have professed their love for Rush. So many fans who are just interesting or have interesting jobs. We had a woman named Liz Swan who wrote a piece about Neil passing away for Psychology Today. So we had her on, and that was one of our first interviews, and was absolutely fantastic. I mean, people are interesting. Find an interesting person, and you could talk to them all day, it seems.
G'day. This is Matty C from the Astros Fantasy Football Podcast, way down in Australia. And we love getting to listen to Marv meet new podcasters from all over the world here on the Pods Like Us podcast.
It'd be nice if you could get an interview with one of the producers, maybe like a Peter Collins or somebody, and then ask them, the behind the scenes of the information that nobody actually ever knows about. What actually goes on in the inner sanctum of the studio with Rush.
Yes, it seems to be there's a blood-brain barrier for guests. Do you know what I mean? Like, we could seem at this point can only go so high. I don't know if we're ever going to get through the barrier to get I don't want to say the big names, but like you said, the people who are intimately involved or were involved in the day-to-day of the creation of some of these albums. I don't know if we're going to get there. Hopefully we will. Keep my fingers crossed.
I think the good thing is that well, I'd say it's good, but also so you've got lots of podcasts about certain subjects like the Beatles. You can it's like you can throw a stone in the pool and 50 or 60 Beatles podcasts will suddenly appear. Whereas with Rush, you're the only Rush podcast that I've actually come across. So I think that adds to that, but also the fact that as you're going, you're getting a larger audience, and I think it's the same with Bad Counsel and with other shows, that as you go on, the knowledge or the appreciation of your show grows, and then more people get to hear about it. So eventually it might come to a stage where you've had this person on, you've had that person on, and they might mention to somebody else who's a bit higher up in that level, and you might get to that level at some point soon. Hopefully, that's how it goes, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're nearing 100 episodes.
It's awesome.
So that in itself
that's a commitment for sure.
Yeah. We definitely get emails. I get a lot of emails. The thing about, I think if you're talking about like Rush being discussed weekly, people are thirsty for it. I get emails from people all the time, and very emotional emails from people who are like, I never had a Rush friend. I never had nobody in my friend group, my wife, my family. They don't understand. You know what I mean? It's like, they don't understand what it's like to be a Rush fan. And so to hear us talking about Rush, I guess in the way that we do, they love it because they feel like they're part of the conversation, which again is such an incredible compliment. And then we get some of the emails that we get are from people who have lost their Rush friend over someone, they passed away from one thing or another, and they miss the conversations they had, and they feel like that they're part of the conversation too. So in a strange way, and again, a humongous compliment. Some people listen to the show to be reminded of their friends and these good times that they had with the band, and they feel like they're part of the conversation. So, I mean, if we could do just those two things for people, and, I would do it until we couldn't do it anymore.
Well, I can attest as a listener, guys, and a Rush fan, that you're nailing those two things. I did feel part of the conversation, and it did fill me with a joyful sense of nostalgia. I'm fortunate that all of my Rush friends, and I have many, I'm lucky to have many, are still with me, but they're far away. In Rush isn't the topic of conversation that we always bring up when we talk, but it is walking down memory lane for me in such a good way to hear you guys talking about your top 10 list. And I'm definitely a fan now. I'm going to go back and listen to more episodes.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. That's such a great compliment. Seriously.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that Steve and I were just talking. Steve gave me a great piece of advice at the beginning, and he said to just talk to him like we're talking. Don't try ignore that you've got a microphone in front of your face and headphones on. And I talk to him, and we talk about Rush, and there you go. That's the show. That's the show in a nutshell.
So, Greg, have you introduced Katie to the music of Rush, or is she already a fan?
No, she's not a fan, and she's not anti-Rush, but she just I don't think she loves how much I love them. I think we were listening to Subdivisions in the car one time. She indulges but I get emotional. I was trying to explain to her the personal meaning of Subdivisions and how closely that aligned with my personal experience, and I get choked up, and she thinks that's adorable, but I don't ever catch her listening to Rush behind my back.
Jonah Matranga of the band Far did a really great version of Subdivisions when Neil died.
Who did?
Jonah Matranga from the band Far.
Okay, cool.
He actually did a cover version of Subdivisions, just him and an acoustic guitar that was really good. I think he did it a day or so after Neil had died, because he was saying that was an important song to him, particularly because he was saying that he always felt like a bit like the one that was left out in high school. And he said, so that song fitted him perfectly back then, and it spoke to him back then. And yeah, he did a great version of that.
It's amazing.
But there, in what you were saying, there's all sorts of musicians that you wouldn't think of that were, affected by the music of Rush. You wouldn't think that the lead singer of an alternative rock band like Far, that were a bit emo based almost, that they would have that influence. But there you go.
Just peerless, musicianship. So I think serious musicians of any genre, you can't not respect the sound that those three guys produced live. In my opinion.
Anyway, what podcast do you listen to in your time, away from your own podcast, Steve?
Well, as I mentioned, my favorite podcast is Radio Lab. NPR produces that. It's great all the time. I listen to baseball podcasts. I listen to Rolling Stone Music Now. One of our previous guests, Brian Hyatt, hosts that podcast. It's terrific. And I try and lately I've been trying to listen to other podcasts that are similar to ours, just to see how we're doing and how other podcasts are handling similar subject matter. So that's what I listen to. Jer?
Yeah, I'm looking at my list right now. I've kind of pared it down recently, but I'm listening to Science Versus, which is a science podcast where they just, try to dispel myths about different scientific topics. Wait, Don't Tell Me. It's a comedy podcast. Very funny. Radio Lab, Stuff You Should Know, which is another podcast I've been listening to for I don't know how long. Has it been around for 10 years? However long it's been around is as long as I've been listening to it.
That is one of the originals from back in the day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
99% Invisible, Hidden Brain, Through Line, My Favorite Murder, of course, is a big one. A little, I don't remember the names of them because they only run for maybe 6 or 10 episodes here and there about different, historical atrocities, for lack of a better word. And another one from the 99% Invisible camp called What Trump Can Teach Us About Constitutional Law.
That's an interesting title.
Yeah, it's a monthly, and it was they're still trying to keep it going now that Trump isn't around. But for 4 years, they did a monthly podcast.
He's around.
Yeah, he's around. That's true.
He's lurking.
It's definitely if you want to learn U.S. constitutional law and Supreme Court cases involved in them, that's the podcast for you.
That does sound interesting, actually.
I'm just waiting for that lorry to drive past.
Sure.
Hey there, this is Bobby with the Rock Guys Podcast, and you are listening to Marv Smooth on the Pods Like Us podcast. Check him out.
So I will ask Gregg now, and Gregg listens to almost as many podcasts as I do, probably more. So off you go.
Very few comedy podcasts. You guys, Marv, you listen to our show. I'm not a laugh out loud kind of guy, ironically, but I do like true crime. I do like The Unexplained is a great podcast. I was into lore for a long time. My introduction to podcasts was the original Serial. I love that. Well, I do listen to one podcast that really does make Katie and I laugh, which is How Did This Get Made? Paul Scheer.
Oh yeah, I listen to that too.
Oh my God, that is a funny podcast. And then Marv and I are part of this great independent podcast community, and so like Concerts That Made Us is awesome. Xander and Stone, the Science and Supernatural podcast, is amazing. And I won't say any more because I'm going to offend all of my podcast friends whose podcast I don't mention. So they're out there. Follow us on Instagram on Bad Counsel, and you'll see us giving respect to all the great independent podcasts out there. We're super proud to be part of that community.
Yeah, I haven't listened. I used to listen to Last Podcast on the Left. I haven't listened to that one in a long time either.
Yeah.
I should get back to that.
I'll give a shout out to a podcast called The Rock Guys with Bob. And that is a great show where it's a relatively short show, but each episode it'll pick a different band from the rock genre and give you what you need to know as an introduction about those bands, and it's really good at what he does there, and he's always a bit excitable, isn't he, Gregg?
He is, yeah, good dude.
Yeah, I chatted with him recently.
Marv, can I be indulged and just shout out my castmates on Bad Counsel? Jack recently appeared on Concerts That Made Us, and we all listened scrupulously to see if he would give us our proper due and credit, as his castmates. It's like, it's like a band member doing an interview without the other guys. So I have to say, guys, my Bad Counsel castmates, Tim, our show's host and producer, is amazing. Jack is kind of my comedic counterpart, where they say that I take crazy situations. No, I take normal situations and make them crazy, and Jack takes crazy situations and tries to normalize them. And then Katie, my beautiful wife, and offers us the female perspective and frankly allows us to get away with saying a lot of misogynist stuff because she laughs, so it could be that bad. So thank you, Marv. Thank you guys. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and I really am a fan and can't wait to listen to more.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
And for me, it's been fun because I've been able to chat about Rush, which I've not been able to do for years. Because, like Gregg, I used to have people that I talked to about Rush, but because I've moved away from there, I don't get to talk to them so much. So it's been a lot of fun to be able to do that.
Well, thanks for having us. We really appreciate it, Martin. And nice to meet you, Gregg.
Thank you, guys. I'll be in touch on Instagram. I'm seriously, I'm a fan. And I just looked up that article by Ms. Swan. And as soon as we hang up, I'm going to listen to Xanadu and read that article. Thank you.
Oh, cool.
So what advice would you give to people starting a podcast for the first time then, Steve?
I would say talk about what you love. That's what made our podcast enjoyable for me, and I think Gerry as well. We're talking about something we love to talk about. The second piece of advice I would give is listen to other podcasts, find out what you like about other podcasts, and try and emulate those. So those would be my two pieces of advice.
Yeah.
Gerry?
I think it would just be, like I said before, just have a conversation. Unless it's a scripted show where you're writing things down, pre-recording them, and doing. And those podcasts are great too. But if you have two people, that's the other thing. I would suggest two people or someone to talk to, at least someone to talk to every episode. Maybe your cat. I don't know if that would work as a podcast, but if you're talking to somebody else, just talk to them. Forget the fact that people might be listening, because if you can be genuine with somebody else, the listener is going to pick up on that. They're going to pick up on the friendship between the two people, or the camaraderie between the two people, or just that the two people like each other. And it's going to make them feel at ease and make them feel, like people say, like they're part of the conversation too.
And I'll ask Gregg if he's got any advice for people as well.
Well, I mean, Steve and Gerry's advice is amazing. You got to be passionate about it. This is definitely a labor of love. And what, Steve, my friends and I did a podcast for 3 years before we did Bad Counsel, and it was about our fantasy baseball league.
Nice.
And baseball in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could swear that Steve Phillips used to steal our sound bites, because we were kind of quirky. We would talk about how handsome some of the players were and if that improved their performance on the field. and we'd hear Steve Phillips make these random references. I'd be like, what the heck? For us, it was, we just realized that just put it out week after week. Put your content out there. Don't be too precious about it. Yeah. You'll have good shows. You'll have other shows that you don't love as much. But honestly, we put stuff out that wasn't exactly my favorite show, but then I come to appreciate it more, and I see the humor in it. And so it's just keeping that schedule, religiously.
Steve, do you think Mike Ford looks better with or without the mustache?
Without the mustache, for sure.
Right.
He can't pull it off. I don't know what it is, but it didn't work. It didn't work for me. I think he was trying to channel his inner Don Mattingly, and then when he didn't hit, mustache came off. Smart move.
Too much watching Magnum from back in the day, I think.
Yeah.
Gerry,
I'm laughing.
didn't expect that.
I have no idea who that is, so I can't even add to the conversation.
Mike Ford now plays for the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons, which tells you how the mustache worked out.
That's a deep cut for someone who plays for the Scranton Wilkes-Barre. What's it? Muskrats? What'd you say?
Rail Riders, not Red Barons. They're the Rail Riders.
Yeah. Oof.
Wow.
They used to be the Red Barons.
That's B-side material right there, man.
It's headline material, Scranton Wilkes-Barre rails the other team.
I can see an offshoot show now with Gregg and Steve talking baseball.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talking baseball.
I love it as much as I love Rush.
So anyway, where can people find the show, and how can they get in touch with you, Steve?
Well, you can find us on the podcast platform that hosts us, Podbean, also Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, anywhere you find podcasts, correct? And if you want to get in touch with Gerry, he handles our emails. It's therushcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @Rush Fancast. We're on Instagram. Gerry handles that at the Rush Fancast. Oh, the Rushcast. Sorry. Instagram, we're the Rushcast. So reach out to us. Send us an email. Let us know what you think of the podcast and check us out. We'd love you to.
Yeah, my favorite thing for people to send us is pictures of their Rush denim jackets. So if you have a Rush denim jacket with something on the back, just send me a picture of it. I'll post it. Doesn't matter what it is.
The more patches, the better.
Right. Or a painting of a fly-by-night owl. That's a big one.
I'll send you my fly-by-night inspired tattoo.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Please do.
Yeah, Jerry
my
will post it on
tattoo artist,
Instagram.
I wanted to put the full snow owl landing, and my tattoo artist was like, "That's impossible, Greg. Light blue ink, that's not going to look good. You live in South Florida." So he did a modified little homage.
Oh, wow,
to
that's cool.
With the
nice.
blue in it.
That is awesome.
So,
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to thank Gregg for helping with
My
this,
pleasure,
this
Marv.
episode
It's my
today.
honor.
It was great. Thank you very much. So let people know how they can get hold of Bad Counsel and how they can get in touch with you.
Well, like Steve mentioned, we're on every podcast platform: iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Anchor. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Audible.com. We're on all of those things. And starting this weekend, we're going to be on YouTube, so you get to see our ugly faces too. So that'll be good. And then on Instagram, it's bad.counsel. And each host has their own Instagram page too. And it's our first names, Gregg _bad.counsel, or Katie bad.counsel, Jack, or Tim bad.counsel. So new show every Wednesday.
Yeah, because you've been doing it with video anyway, haven't you? When you've been using Riverside,
yeah.
But you've not actually put them out as video before.
We haven't. We're a little bit undercover, especially based on the things that we say in our day jobs. But we figured, you know what? If people find us on YouTube and they see us, that's probably a good thing. That means people are finding us. So we'll roll the dice. We're not hurting anybody after all.
Yeah, you'll roll the bones.
Yeah, exactly. I missed that. Oh, Marv, that would have been a perfect line for me. Sorry. Go back and re-edit that, me saying that, please.
Well, then you can say it again and I'll edit it in.
I guess we'll just roll the bones with that, Steve. I mean, with... fuck. All right, never mind.
And you can find Pods Like Us on any streaming network. And if you go to the marvzone.org, in the menu there, you'll find a section that says Pods Like Us, and there are write-ups about all the episodes and the behind-the-scenes stories of each of the episodes for you to look at if you want to listen or read that sort of thing. Anyway, thanks very much, guys, and great talking to you, and thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.